an American river meets the sea by the coast. And where that happens, people gather. And the instruments of their trade and production become voracious in their appetites, and cities form. The human use of this place is the extension of the human perception of the place. Places are used as they're perceived. Humans in the last century tried to dike it and farm it. And they blew that badly in 1868 or thereabouts. Mosquito people took over and worked their will on the land and to get rid of mosquitoes, which carried malaria in the minds of everyone who swatted mosquitoes. Those are all part of that previous effort, first to farm and then to dike and then to ditch and to contain mosquitoes in the freshwater marsh. 6 miles from here is New York City, and New York City became a metropolitan area. And that pattern of history governed this place with the greatest appetite and capacity to change.
The country's big cities were built where wetlands once were, and learning how not to absorb it all in urban expansion is one of the great lessons of environmental science.
This area was scheduled to be filled with garbage. I started being interested here in the meadows. I was 11 years old, and there was other young fellows in town that I used to go out there with, and we all pursued trapping, hunting out in the meadows, and fishing, just roaming in there in the summertime, collecting turtles and frogs and other things like young kids do. And I became more and more interested in the ecosystem as time went on, how one thing related to another. I still hunted and trap it to a degree. It's places like this, left here, that keep people like myself. That keeps us around here, I guess. Take these away and we'd have to leave too.
We have to have more than a cage to live in with food and drink supplied every day. And I think some of those things that tend to get lumped under the heading of aesthetics, but which I think are very important for the existence of human beings. An aspect of that is supplied by open space and wild animals and wetlands, particularly in a place like the New York metropolitan area. You think of what there is in the way of relatively wild open space. If I lived in the city, I would be spending all kinds of time out there, weekends and holidays.
This is a part of my life since I was allowed out of the backyard. And I've been a lot of places and tried a lot of things, and I had an interesting thing happen one time. We drove all the way up to New York State to hunt, looking for paradise. We got talking to a farmer who told us about a fantastic place to hunt. His brother-in-law lived down there. It's in New Jersey. And he said, oh, where is this? Where's this fantastic place? And he said, down by the Hackensack River. Oh, it's fantastic. And we realized, what the hell are we driving all these miles for? The truth was, everything we wanted was here. In the shadow of New York City, you have still a piece of wild country.
The places that are really wild in the metropolitan area are Jamaica Bay, and the Hackensack Meadowlands. There are ducks nesting there, and not mallards, which are sort of semi-tame, but teal and other kinds of things. The birds come there because of the wetlands, the protected area, the open space, and the food, which is there as a result of the productivity of the marshes, and they're wonderful wild areas, and you can get right up to them and in them, and you can see their wildness.
To me, it's a really marvelous place. One of the most fascinating places that I have been in. And that includes coral reefs and rainforests and a whole bunch of other things. And I think the reason is, to me, so interesting is that in spite of the multiplicity of tremendous stresses that people and their activities have brought on the system, you still go in there and you get in a canoe, and of course you couldn't smell the air and hear the traffic in the turnpike. You would think you were in a pristine natural environment. And that really is a marvelous evidence of how tough these plants and animals and macros that are living in wetlands can be.
The system around here is heavily stressed with landfills, highways, commercial uses, industrial uses. But somehow, when you're out here, you begin to forget about those. But in between aircraft, one can hear the same wild sounds you could hear in the Delta Marsh in Manitoba. Not a whole heck of a lot different.
When I first moved to Lyndhurst, there wasn't anything here. This was all swamp. There wasn't a road, there wasn't anything. This dump wasn't even here. And now it's really changing.
When people who kept records first discovered this area, it was, you know, really a paradise in terms of a kind of a swampy, floodplain, meadowland existence. Marvelous example of it. But the problem was, in those days, not understanding the ecological chain the way we hope we do now, they just thought of it as a non-useful place. It's a place where no one could build anything because the ground was so unstable and floods came. So consequently, what better place to just dump anything you didn't want?
200 years ago, the planet was a series of human settlements surrounded by wildlife. At the time of the American Revolution, there were maybe 50,000 people living in and around New York City. Around the Hackensack River to the west were over 30,000 acres of open spaces, fields, meadows, wetlands. Today, all that remains in the Hackensack Meadows are 4,700 acres of wetlands.
This black pool that's here to my right is full of leachate. Leachate is the liquid residue from all of this garbage and refuse that's been buried in these hills that we see over on this side and throughout this area. That liquid comes from the decomposition of the materials in here. It rots and decays. Liquid joins the groundwater and breaks out here on the surface. It's full of all the contaminants and chemicals that are in our modern society. And nature tries to deal with this wastewater. What our job is to come in, look at this area, look at the conditions here, and see if we could convert this to a park. What do you think? Pretty messy, huh?
Yeah.
You gonna help us clean it up?
Gonna try.
Yeah, we're gonna try too.
That'd be a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it would be a great idea.
What would you like to see out here besides garbage?
A playground. Wildlife. A playground and a wildlife.
A very astute and energetic man named Paul Ilvasacker entered the stage in the late 60s of this place, and he said, "The Hackensack Meadowlands can be planned." And he put together with Cliff Goldman the idea that a balanced community could be extracted from the wasteland, and that the garbage and its image could be chased, and something different could happen here.
Now, remember that scrap we had with the landfill people? This building sits on the place where they put that illegal fill back in 1970. That was before the plan was even on a piece of paper. It wasn't even on Cliff Goldman's napkin at that point. But the commission said, no, you're not going to fill this with garbage until we see if it's the right place to put garbage. And Superior Court upheld us.
One of the troubles with this state was it never had a state perspective. It was only accumulation of local perspectives. So what we did was simply to assert a state-level perspective. And that suddenly raised energy levels entirely, and that's something of a political act.
This is the 100th anniversary of Frederick Law Olmsted, who planned parks all over this country so that people could live next to them. We think that houses belong next to a park and in a park, but we don't think that housing is the only use that ought to be here. This is Garbage Alley, and it could become another garbage dump, and we're looking for a development that can work. Not only work...
Just about the time the commission was being formed, people across the country began to be more attuned to their environment, and one of the things was that wetlands are not waste areas. They do have values other than places that should be filled and developed, and that they are very important to our well-being for many different reasons. Flood control, water recharge, especially in inland areas where well water is a very important source for people's water supply, and a big contribution they make to our marine fisheries.
Here you have something the state virtually owns. It doesn't cost them anything to maintain it. It's here. It can be used. Doesn't cost them a dime. The water tide comes in, tide goes out. Nature does all that. You don't have to touch it. You don't have to invest any money. You don't have to pour any concrete, put up any steel. It's here. All you have to do is use it.
We have a lot of people in Jersey that run to the shore every year and go fishing and crabbing and partake of the good things that the Jersey shore and the estuary produces for them. Many of those people bought homes that were built on top of wetlands that were producing the things that they'd like to go down there to get. But they don't make the connection because no one showed or taught that to them. And when they're busy down there in the summertime, they don't take the time to go to a place like this. But we can reach the children, I'm sure, a short ways down the road. The possibility of bringing thousands and thousands of both adults and children to this facility to teach them the important role that wetlands play in our overall ecological system.
There's a shorebird. There's a shorebird coming in here.
We also were driven up here by the motorbikes this morning. There are so many more today than usual. A Henslow sparrow? Oh, that's definitely one of the plovers. Is that? Judging from the head, yeah. It's all yours. Oh, got it, yeah. Oh, here it is, right here.
Oh, okay, if he turns around, I got him. He's a semi-pollinated plover.
All right.
It's cleaning up a little bit, you know. They're going to get the trucks out of here, the garbage trucks, and it's going to be a lot better. But I think more birds are starting to appear here, more than there have been. You know, they're migrating down, so there's not that many areas to have anymore. Take what they can get.
I think I'm too old to enjoy some of the more energetic parts of belonging to conservation societies, but I like being out and seeing what I can see. I've been in other parts of the meadows, past garbage dumps on one side, and I've seen the gulls there and the egrets, and owls on occasion, long-eared owls once. They were wonderful. And it's exciting to see them. Just the way the other day I woke up, it was early in the morning, still dark, and over my own house I heard the Canada geese go by, and I wished them well. It's the most primitive sound and exciting, just exciting to hear, and to hope they get where they're going safely.
Right now, us and the marsh, are holding our own with habitat for the birds, and there's an incredible variety. Use this place. When the ponds and brooks and all are frozen, the brackish marsh is the only place with open water. And it's got the feed, it's got the weed seeds, it's got everything. The marsh grass and the mud. It has a wild kind of a beauty. Even in the late winter, sometimes the wind is blowing and the foxtails are waving and the ducks are banking around in the wind. It's beautiful. You almost lost this river to so-called progress. I wonder what kind of progress is it that uses up everything green.
I've always been fascinated by the history of the Hackensack Meadowlands, and like everybody else, really the only impression you have of it, or the first impression, is coming along the turnpike. You look out and you say, hey, it was one of the greatest wetlands in the Northeast, and you tend to just keep on driving. But, you know, where are we going to stop? You keep driving farther to the south, you get Chesapeake Bay, and now that's in a lot of trouble, and they're putting $40 million out over 4 years, or $10 million a year, to try and figure out just what's happening down there. You go farther south, you end up down in Mobile, Alabama, and you've got a bay down there that is subject, and this is the key to it, subject to all the same abuses that have happened here, except they're 20 years away. So if people from Mobile can come up and look at what's happened here, see the similarities, see the threats that exist, and see the cost, and I think this is the most important part, the cost that is coming to recapture and protect a remnant of this marsh, then we've learned an important lesson.
I can imagine reading, you know, a little comic in the paper 20 years from now. You know, I've always wanted to draw it myself and send it into a newspaper with 10 guys huddled around a piece of water, a pond, either trying to duck hunt or fish or crab, a little ring of cattails around it with the sports complex, football game this way, racetrack that way, hockey game here, and one guy saying, yeah, I'm glad they decided to save us a piece of the Meadowlands. And that's it. 10 foot by 10 foot, and that's it.